Let me introduce Paula, whom you mostly know. She is Bio4Climate's Associate Director and a prime mover behind this conference. And she will introduce George.
So, good morning, everybody. Good sixth day of the Blessed Unrest conference. I'm very honored to be introducing George Scarlett, who is a colleague and friend of Biodiversity for a Livable Climate. George is a professor at Tufts University, senior lecturer in the Elliott Pearson Department of Child Study and Human Development, and a faculty fellow at the Tisch College of Civic Engagement, also at Tufts. Dr. Scarlett, may I call you George?
Please.
George was determined that the Blessed Unrest conference be hosted by Tufts, and he pulled us away from Harvard. And both of those schools at Tufts, as well as the Environmental Studies Department, are sponsors of this conference thanks to his good efforts. George's focus as a child development, human development professional has focused on children's play, working with kids with behavioral issues, and a real focus on religious and spiritual development across the lifespan. Students from his class that he developed for Tufts, and maybe it's the first in the country, I don't know. The class is called Children, Nature, and the Development of Earth Stewards. Some of his first students participated in Bio4Climate's 2018 conference on climate, biodiversity, and survival, listening to the voices of nature. And they further encouraged George to pursue ways to develop Earth stewardship in young people. And a most recent and very promising project that he is developing, actually the first issue is out, the second is coming soon, I believe, is a website called Tomorrow's Earth Stewards, with articles on programs and methods being used around the world to support children and youth's development as Earth stewards. And do we ever need this? Do we ever need a generation that feels so connected and so in love with the planet and so aware of what we need to do to take care of it? George has written about our work at Biodiversity for a Livable Climate as an inspiration for him, and he is an inspiration for us. And I'm very pleased to introduce George Scarlett now with respect and appreciation.
Thank you so much, Paula. It really is true that I owe a lot to you and Adam and Bio4Climate, and I'll try to make that clear in my introductions. 5 years ago, I changed course and committed myself to doing whatever I could to contribute to the environmental movement, or more specifically to the movement to nourish children's and youth's development as Earth stewards. Being a developmental psychologist, I took as my first task that of figuring out what we should mean by development as it applies to Earth stewardship. The concept of development implies development towards something taken to be more mature or even ideal. And so to better understand what that something is, I turned to studying exemplary Earth stewards such as John Muir and Rachel Carson. They taught me to think of development with respect to Earth stewardship in terms of three components, namely experiencing wonder, thinking about causes and mechanisms, and taking action. It's clear that each of these three components of Earth stewardship develops not alone, but in relationship to one another. Take first the experience of wonder. The experience of wonder begins through the senses as one experiences wonder upon seeing a butterfly, then progresses with the ability to experience wonder through fantasies produced, say, when making fairy houses, then on to the ability to experience wonder in, say, the fact that horseshoe crabs have been on the planet for millions of years. Finally, the endpoint of development with respect to experiencing wonder seems to be experiencing wonder in nature's systems. For example, no one can miss the wonder in Rachel Carson's prose poetry as she gives us scientific accounts of complex ocean food cycles and other ocean systems. This example of Rachel Carson finding wonder in food cycles and other ocean systems shows also how Earth stewards develop to the extent that their thinking develops, from linear causal thinking to thinking in terms of systems, but also from simple anthropomorphizing when explaining, say, how mother robins act just like human mothers, no intended metaphorizing needed to explain, all the way up to Lynn Margulis taking pains to not only think in terms of systems, but also to reject the term cooperation as being too metaphorical for explaining symbiosis. With regard to action, even very young children take action to show care for the natural world. In simple acts such as telling a peer not to get too close to a butterfly, lest the butterfly get frightened, all the way up to the complex and often agonizing balancing acts that leaders engage in when working to wean us from unsustainable to more sustainable ways of living. All this conceptualizing about the development of Earth stewards was personally satisfying, even fun. It's what I like to do. But I knew from the beginning that the real work lay ahead of me and that I was totally unprepared to take it on. Understanding development is never just about defining what develops. Understanding development is also about understanding the problems and challenges that spur development on. I knew that if I were to truly understand what it means to develop as an Earth steward in the 21st century, I would need help to understand the problems and challenges that confront us now and that could call for us to be Earth stewards. And so I turned to Biodiversity for a Livable Climate to teach me about the problems, challenges, and solutions that define what it means to be an Earth steward in the 21st century. I was not disappointed. In fact, I was both informed and inspired by what Bio for Climate offered me, and for that I'm truly grateful. Specifically, for the past 4 years, Bio for Climate has taught me eco-restoration ways of thinking about Earth stewardship and best practices for healing our ailing planet, or at least for helping nature do the healing. And one of the most important lessons I've learned is the lesson to act small while thinking big. Let me explain. The big abstractions captured by watchwords such as sustainable and interdependence and even biodiversity are absolutely good and necessary abstractions for the way they frame problems and point in the direction of solutions. But they don't do the hard work of defining what we as individuals can do to serve our planet as Earth stewards. If Einstein's happy phrase, God is in the details, can be reworked a bit, I think the guiding principles I have taken from Bio for Climate is the phrase, Earth stewardship is in the details. Details that crop up over and over in the Bio for Climate conferences I have attended, and getting from a small group of women monitoring methane gas leaks in the city of Cambridge, and getting the city to tear up concrete on some tiny island at a street intersection and replacing it with all things green, to an educator leading young adults in planting oysters in Boston Harbor, to designing a clean energy catamaran to resupply a crew working to save a coral reef, to developing an online game that gets urban youth thinking in terms of systems when solving ecology-based problems, to restoring seagrass beds along coastlines. The list of details goes on and on and on, and gives us not only guidance, but also hope, another kind of blessed unrest, a blessed unrest of methods offering unlimited ways to develop as an Earth steward. The message here is clear. It is not just biodiversity that makes for a livable climate. It is also methods diversity for acting as Earth stewards. Today's conference speakers continue in this tradition I have just described, offering us diverse and detailed ways to act as Earth stewards, from guiding townships to adopt a systems approach to living sustainably, to designing cities that reduce heat, to organizing protest movements to get others to move in right directions. The details to be discussed in today's conference join the details discussed in the past, all fascinating and much needed, and all offering a blessed unrest of methods to act as Earth stewards. And now to introduce our morning speakers. Our first speakers are Steve Weinberg and Cynthia Conti. Steve and Cynthia began working together when both became deeply involved with the eco-municipalities movement taking place in Sweden. The story of their involvement in the Swedish movement turned into a story of their working together to provide guidance for towns in the US, guidance for becoming eco-municipalities. Our second speaker, Christopher Haines, is an architect devoted to promoting architectural design as a way to achieve sustainable living practices. His writings and public work have covered a wide variety of topics, including the topic of the human willpower it takes to live sustainably. But today his goal, as he would put it, is to get us to focus on the fire under the pot and not just focus on the lid lifting to release carbon. The fire being the heat caused by the ways we have designed cities and denatured our countryside. Our afternoon speakers will be introduced after lunch when we reconvene. They will be helping us better understand the power and nature of today's youth movements, movements that have already made a difference in the political landscape and in the awareness that today, not tomorrow, is the time to act. So let us now begin with our first speakers and welcome Steve Weinberg and Cynthia Conti, who will be speaking about eco-municipalities.